You're listening to the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
We are continuing our series on hobbies, and I have to say, this is probably one of the funnest series we've ever done. Because quite often when we do series, they're very serious series. And this is very serious. We're serious fun. Today, we are doing more things with our hands. Today, we're going to talk with Erin Alter. And anybody who's been to the International Center who's met Erin knows that she is super creative and does like all these beautiful things. Sews all these beautiful things. So I'm stoked about talking with Erin today about sewing. Are you?
I am too.
You are.
I'm laughing because you said you were stoked.
Oh, sorry.
I'm very excited to talk about sewing today because Erin makes her own clothes and it's fantastic.
Thanks to Concordia University, Wisconsin for supporting the Coffee Hour. Find out more about Concordia University, Wisconsin at cuw.edu.
Live uncommon.
Joining us today, Erin Alter, Director of Short-Term Missions for the LCMS Office of International Mission, and I might add also a co-host on the Lutheran Ladies Lounge podcast. Erin, welcome to the Coffee Hour.
Hello. Thank you.
Now, on the lounge, on the Lutheran Ladies Lounge, I think your segment is what always it involves food. It's the recipe card, isn't it?
I have two segments, but yes, the food one is one of my segments. Erin's recipe card.
You don't have a sewing segment on the lounge, do you?
No,
not yet.
One would be it. You're right, not yet.
There's always room for growth. New things.
Yeah.
So, Erin, where did your interest in sewing begin?
Well, back in 1999, right after I graduated from college, I spent a summer where I was living at home, and I decided to teach myself to sew. And so that's when it started. But that was really a small slice of time, and then I left it behind for 14 years or so. And it was back then in 2014 that I suddenly was hit by the urge that I wanted to do that again. And I picked it up again. Yeah.
So in 99, 2000, it was really in preparation for Y2K, wasn't it? That's why you started sewing.
It's quite possible.
Because you knew that you were going to have these life skills.
Survival skill.
Yes.
And now, like at the top of your game at 2020, you're going to have these important life skills. So what did you start with when you started back in like 99, 2000? What were some of the things that you started with, with some of the projects you started with?
I'll be honest, the way I approach sort of my hobbies in general, I don't usually start with beginner level stuff. I prefer to fling myself in over my head, and I know that I'm going in over my head, and that part does not bother me. So I started by making outfits. I've made several dresses. One that I since went back and I remembered how much I loved the pattern. I found the pattern again because I wanted to recreate it. And I looked at it and I was like, what on earth? How did I do this when I was brand new, like never sewed? How did I think to tackle this? But that's just how I roll. I prefer to just make what I want to make and not worry about how hard it is, and just take my time and work through the mistakes and start over again and fix the errors and embrace the imperfections.
Sometimes trial by fire is way more fun than taking baby steps. And sometimes, and you can learn a lot more about the process too, especially if you make like massive mistakes and then go back and figure out how to fix them.
That is also true. Not everyone is wired that way. So I don't think that would necessarily be a successful way for everyone to approach hobbies. But something I learned, it took me a while. It was about maybe three or 4 years into sewing this time around, since I picked it up again, I realized that what I really enjoyed about sewing, the sewing itself was fun, but that was sort of secondary. What I really enjoyed and what was really fulfilling to me was the learning new things.
Mhm.
And so for me, that was what it was feeding, was this desire to be learning something new and learning something totally different. And sewing is about as different as you get from my regular work. So it was ideal in that way to feed that part of it, the curiosity and the desire to learn and master something new.
Mhm. So how has that, skill evolved over time? Because 'Cause you're still making clothes, but what's changed? What's developed?
Yeah, so as I've gone along, I've basically challenged myself with different different aspects of there's all sorts of different specialized types of sewing that you can do. So I worked, like, one of the projects that I took on and slowly got better at was pants. Pants
Mm.
are very tricky because you got three tubes that are coming together, and they gotta come together well, and you've got a lot. It's complicated, especially if you throw in a zipper fly. Boy, that is super complicated. Uh, so pants are really, really a tricky one. Fitting was then another thing that I decided to really try and focus on and learn about how to how to read how to read the fabric as it was on me, because I don't have a dummy or a mannequin that I use. I just fit it on myself as I go. And so I had to learn how to read what the what the muslin is telling me. A muslin is like a rough draft,
Mhm.
and I pretty much make muslins for everything unless I've made the pattern before, um, so that I've already worked out all of the fitting issues. But learn to read the wrinkles and the drag lines to tell me, oh, it needs to come in there, it needs to go out there, that needs to be moved. I need to add a dart here, or try something else totally different. So that was another challenge. As I worked along, I tackled learning to make a jacket, and then I decided I would make a leather jacket, and
Oh.
that was exciting because working with leather was totally different and very unforgiving, because leather, once there is a hole there, it doesn't go away. Um,
Mhm.
so I had to use binder clips instead of pins to hold it together as I was sewing. And at one point, I like sliced open something in a totally wrong place and looked at it with horror, and then, very wisely, this was also something I learned along the way. I said, I'm going to set this aside and I'll look at this tomorrow. When you're very upset is a terrible time to try and fix something. So I came back the next day and decided that my pocket, I basically made it extra wide. Anyway, I ended up with pocket fangs, as my brother-in-law called them. I basically slapped on two triangle patches on either side of the pocket so that there were these fangs on either end of the pocket, and it became a design feature of the jacket. Um, Another project that was a lot of fun, that was a different approach, was learning traditional tailoring techniques.
Mm.
So for that, I had to get like a legit thimble and did all sorts of hand sewing to make my winter coat. And I love it. I'll wear it for a decade, maybe longer. But like, I did all sorts of hand sewing on that one, with hair canvas, and I had to get silk thread so that I could just basically mold the collar and the lapels so that they would never you didn't have to iron them in place. They just stayed that way because the fabric was made to hold that position. But that was a challenging project. That was the one that probably took me the longest. I worked, I would say, at least a year on that. It's hard to say because I put it aside for a chunk of time once I spent I spent 6 months on it initially and then realized there was no chance I was going to be able to wear that until the following winter. Like I was still far from the finish and spring was approaching, and I decided normally my rule is I work on one project at a time and I work on it till it's finished. And I don't have multiple projects going because that would I felt that was going to be too much of a chance that I would have lots of things going and nothing finishing. So I start one project and I finish it. But in that case, I gave myself permission to set it aside and work on something else for a while. And then I picked it up again the following fall and finally then finished it in, I want to say, January or February of that year. But since then, I've worn it all winter long, every year, and it, I'll love it forever.
This is fascinating.
I know.
Now, and I have to admit, I did learn some sewing skills back in like middle school. My mom taught me some skills, and then we had a
Aw.
class at school where we learned some skills. So I've made a few things, like a basic pair of shorts for the summer, or
Uh-huh.
for back at in college, orientation staff used to all have like matching shorts. We'd get fabric at the beginning of the summer, and then we'd all make our own shorts, or someone would make them for you over the summer. Yes. So I do have experience making some clothes, but nothing near as intricate as what Erin has made here. I want to know, Erin, who has influenced your sewing the most? Have there been others, like have you had mentors or others that you follow that have influenced your sewing?
You know, I can't put my finger on any one person. I mean, my mom taught me the earliest stuff, like you. She, probably back when I was in middle school, taught me to do the very basics, but I didn't have any interest in pursuing it at that time. Um, when I was then starting to teach myself to sew, basically it was all sorts of online sewists. There were all sorts of bloggers who blogged about their sewing experiences, and I could basically Google for anything I was trying to figure out, and there would be some site that would have an explanation for how to tackle something tricky, like a step by step in how to install a zipper fly, or how to do a button placket, or whatever it is. Um, so there were a number of online people, but I've never met any of them. I would totally go all fangirl if I ever had the chance to meet some of them, because I'm like, I feel like I know you and you have no idea who I am, and it would be awesome. But basically, online people, a lot of it has shifted now to Instagram, and
Mm.
that's part of what has sort of pushed me to try and explore and get to know Instagram, because I was like, oh, I don't need another social media forum. But that's where all the cool pictures were happening. So if I wanted to be able to keep up with it and get the ideas and so forth, I had to dive into Instagram. So yeah.
We're talking with Erin Alter during our Hobbies series. Erin's talking about sharing her stories of sewing, and much more to learn with Erin here on the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
You're a miracle. You know that, right? A living, breathing, one-of-a-kind miracle. You were created to stand apart, to share your gifts in the service of others, to make an uncommon impact in a common world. And at Concordia University, it's our mission to help you do that. To live uncommon. To learn more about Concordia, go to cuw.edu.
Welcome back to the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
We are continuing our hobby series here on the Coffee Hour and having maybe too much fun with it.
It's so fun.
Well, it is because, many of us probably have more time at home these days. What are some ways that you're making the most of that time, using that time to do something that's meaningful? Today, we're talking with one of our friends, Erin Alter. She's Director of Short-Term Missions for the LCMS Office of International Mission and a co-host of the Lutheran Ladies Lounge podcast here on KFUO. And Erin's hobby, sewing. It sounds like it's one of maybe a few hobbies, but enjoying learning about your sewing experience. What has been your favorite project so far? Did you like that? So far.
LOL.
So far. Yes. Probably my favorite project was the winter coat that I made, and yet also that was the one that I hated the most. So I have mixed feelings about it. I both love it and hate it. At this point, I remember it only fondly, but at the time there was much boredom and tears and trouble along the way. The project that I've made the most at this point is actually a pattern that's basically it's a pattern that can be either overalls or pants, and I've made that one at least 4 times now. So you could say that that's my favorite project or pattern because I've made it more than any other. That's something that I learned along the way, that maybe I don't need to just always make something new. I could take a pattern that I had already done all the work on and made all the adjustments on, and then consider how do I want to tweak this so that it doesn't necessarily look like the same thing done again. So it still has a bit of uniqueness to it, but I don't have to go through the whole fitting process, which is a chunk of time, let me tell you. So I now I have 2 pairs. No, I've made it 5 times. I forgot one. So I have I have 3 pairs of pants, and then this last winter I ended up using it and made 2 pairs of overalls. And at some point I'll probably make another pair of overalls with it, just because they're super adorable.
They
So
are.
I can't resist them. I keep doing them again.
I remember when you were going through that project and the first day that you wore those overalls to work, we were all like oogling over them because they were all flowery and so fun.
Yeah.
And yes, so great, so great. Do you have a favorite fabric or pattern to work with? Like style of fabric, not like pattern.
Yeah. No, the fabric wise, this is another thing I learned along the way, and was like, well, you have the option to do this if I want. One of the beautiful things about sewing is that you can be more particular. Now sometimes it's harder, you have to wait to find what you really want, but my favorite thing to work with is natural fibers. And at this point, with very few exceptions, all of my clothes are natural fibers, and here's why: because they don't hold the stank. And and they are easier to work with. Like when you're ironing, you don't have to worry about melting them, which you can literally do with polyester. Like you can literally melt the fabric when you're trying to iron it. And so yeah, I like that. And then I also like how it wears, and that it does it holds up. So that's I prefer to work with natural fibers. So mostly it's going to be either cotton or wool. Those are what I work with the most. I've done some with silk, and silk is nice, but it's a lot. It's fiddly. So I don't do a lot with silk. Plus my lifestyle just isn't really silk. Um, but wool and cotton, I do a lot of wool and cotton. I'd like to do linen, but I haven't had a lot of luck in finding a good source
Hmm.
for nice linen fabric.
That's fascinating. When you said natural fibers, I had to pause for a moment. I was like, I really hope she's going to explain what that means, because I hope that didn't mean like I didn't know if that meant like that you were like using plants and weaving the fabric yourself.
I
That takes
haven't gotten
hobby to
that
a whole
far
new level.
yet. That would be a whole nother level of the hobby. I've not gotten into weaving yet. Maybe someday.
One One of my favorite questions to ask in this hobby series is most memorable mistake. Now, you mentioned a mistake earlier, and I don't know if that qualifies as your most memorable or not. But do you have a most memorable mistake from your hobby of sewing?
Let me think. Um,
This is deep
well,
contemplation.
yeah, I know. So most of the time I don't remember them because I can fix it. But here's one that I do remember, and this was the most memorable one was when I was taken in by the story on the picture of the pattern envelope. And you know
Mm.
how you get that? And it's like I saw the picture and I was like, ooh, yes, I want to make that. But really, what I admired about it was, oh, this woman, she looks so elegant. And so I tried to recreate it, and it was a horrible. I never wore it. So
Well,
I,
mine
I
never looked
made
like the
this.
pattern.
So I made this shirt, and I made it. Oh, it was such a terrible mistake. I made it in this beautiful, like, light gold fabric, and I don't know what I was thinking, because that is not who I am. I never wear that color. Anyway, I looked like death. And I put it on, and it was just this big shapeless thing. I did not look anything like the pattern envelope. Um, I did not look elegant. I looked blah. And so then my lesson from that was I need to think about what myself, who do I want to be, and not try and be what's on the picture, but instead sort of think through what is going to look like me, what do I want to be wearing, as opposed to who do I want to be. If that I don't know if I quite said that exactly right, but
Hmm.
basically don't try and be someone else, try and be myself. And I had that disaster one. It never made it out of the house. I don't think I even finished it completely. I got 3/4 of the way through, tried it on, and I realized this was a disaster, and I threw it immediately away. Um, but I still spent some time and money on it.
Hmm.
But I remember the lesson now.
Two things that keep coming up while you're talking is mistakes are just ways to learn about yourself and how to move forward, and know who you are when you're doing a craft, and don't do the craft or hobby for anyone else but yourself. Which
Yes.
I think are those are very valuable things, because these hobbies that we do, they're things that we enjoy doing, and things that we like to do with our hands, with the gifts that we've been given. And it's just fun. We don't have a whole lot of time left, but I want to know if you have some tips for newbies or people that have been thinking about dabbling in sewing, but are a little afraid to pull out the 50-year-old sewing machine.
Dabbling. You make it sound like it's a
Yeah.
dangerous art, dabbling.
I mean,
I would say, but go for it. Don't get hung up on perfection, though. So mistakes are part of it, and just acknowledge that they're going to be there. If you keep trying to make it perfect, you will never finish a single project. So instead, aim for what you want to actually learn from that one, and do it, and then start your next project. And the early stuff will be it won't be perfect, and that's okay. The point wasn't perfection. The point was to be learning and to be making something, to spend the time growing and exploring with that. As far as like tools and stuff, I would say love your seam ripper. That goes with acknowledging mistakes. So it is okay to actually, tear out something and do it again and make a rough draft. A lot of people don't bother with that. I make a rough draft of any new pattern that I'm going to make. I basically get super cheap fabric and just make up a rough draft and try it on and make the adjustments. And then I use the real fabric and do it again, and there's much fewer mistakes in that case. So make a rough draft, basically practice.
Mhm.
Use your seam ripper, make a rough draft, and have fun. Don't let yourself get too caught up in the pursuit of perfection and miss how much fun it is to make.
Erin, thank you so much for joining us for this hobby series and sharing your great hobby of sewing. This has been fantastic. I've learned a lot.
So fun.
Thanks so much for being our guest on the Coffee Hour.
You're welcome. I enjoyed it as well.
I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
The Coffee Hour with Andy and Sarah is a production of KFUO. To support the Coffee Hour and KFUO Radio, visit KFUO.org. You can also text KFUO to 41444 or send an email to gifts@kfuo.org. And you can call us at 800-844-0524. KFUO. Christ for you, anytime, anywhere.